Hey everyone, and welcome back to Weird Facts. Today we're diving deep into some of the most bizarre and crazy historical myths that you may have heard of, but probably didn't know the full story behind. So sit back, grab your favorite snack, and let's get started. The Nazis made soap from humans. Well, it's certainly a shocking and grisly claim, so it's not hard to see why the idea that the Nazis made soap from humans has captured people's imaginations. After all, if you're going to demonize an already heinous regime, accusing them of turning human remains into everyday household items is a pretty effective way to do it. Of course, the problem with this particular myth is that it's simply not true. But sometimes, in the face of such incredible evil, people may be inclined to believe the worst about their oppressors. After all, the Nazis were responsible for some of the most heinous crimes in history. So it's not surprising that rumors and propaganda about their atrocities would take hold. The belief that the Nazis manufactured soap from human remains stems from the production of soap stamped with RIF in some concentration camps. This led to the misinterpretation that the letters stood for pure Jewish fat in German. However, the letters actually represent a Reich industry fat. Scientific tests conducted on these soap bars found no evidence of human DNA. The myth of human fat being used in soap production was prevalent during World War I, not just in Germany, but also in France. Cleopatra is Egyptian. The reason many people think Cleopatra is Egyptian is likely due to her association with Egypt as the last active ruler of the Ptolemaic Kingdom of Egypt. Despite the fact that the Ptolemaic dynasty was of Greek Macedonian origin, the Ptolemies had been ruling Egypt for several centuries before Cleopatra's reign. And they had developed a complex cultural and ethnic identity that combined Greek and Egyptian elements. As a result, the Ptolemaic court was a center of Hellenistic culture and scholarship, but also incorporated elements of Egyptian culture and religion. Furthermore, during her reign, Cleopatra identified herself as the pharaoh of Egypt and took on many of the symbols and trappings of traditional Egyptian royalty, such as wearing the traditional Egyptian headdress, the uraeus, and having her likeness depicted in the traditional Egyptian style. This association with traditional Egyptian symbols and culture has contributed to the perception of Cleopatra as an Egyptian figure, even though her ethnic and cultural background was more closely tied to the Hellenistic world. Additionally, over time, popular culture has helped to reinforce the image of Cleopatra as a beautiful, exotic Egyptian queen, with depictions of her in literature, art, and film emphasizing her Egyptian identity and features. These images have helped to cement Cleopatra's place in the popular imagination as an iconic figure of ancient Egyptian history, despite her complex cultural background. The Romans spoke Classical Latin. Classical Latin was the literary and formal language of ancient Rome, but it was not the everyday language spoken by the Romans. The Latin spoken by the people of Rome, commonly known as Vulgar Latin, evolved over time and was influenced by various factors, such as the regional dialects and the languages of the conquered peoples. Vulgar Latin was a more colloquial and simplified form of Latin that was spoken by the common people and used in everyday communication. While Classical Latin was the language of formal education, literature, and official documents, Vulgar Latin was the language of the people. It is worth noting that the distinction between Classical and Vulgar Latin is somewhat artificial, and that there was likely a continuum of Latin dialects spoken across the Roman Empire. So, to clarify, while the Latin spoken by the average Roman citizen in their daily life was not the same as the formal written Latin used by educated elites, the term Classical Latin is used to refer to the written language of ancient Rome, which is studied and taught in academic settings today. Slaves built pyramids. The evidence is mixed, but the commonly held belief is that slaves did not build the pyramids. It is believed that the pyramids were built by a large workforce of skilled laborers who were paid for their work and were not slaves. The workers were organized into gangs, each led by a foreman, and were housed in nearby settlements where they were provided with food, water, and other necessities. Some of the workers may have been temporary laborers or conscripts, but the evidence does not support the idea that they were slaves in the modern sense of the word. The exact nature of the workforce that built the pyramids is still a subject of much debate among scholars, but it is widely believed that slaves did not play a significant role in their construction. The Vikings wore horned helmets. No, Vikings did not wear horned helmets. This is a common myth that dates back to the 19th century when it was popularized in art and literature. No evidence of horned helmets has been found in archaeological finds from the Viking Age. The Vikings would have worn more practical helmets made of iron or bronze for protection during battles. The Great Wall of China can be seen from space. Ah, the Great Wall of China. A magnificent engineering feat that spans thousands of miles. It's a structure so impressive that it has spawned many myths and legends, including the one that it can be seen from space. However, as much as it pains me to burst this particular bubble, the fact of the matter is that the Great Wall of China cannot be seen from space. Here's why. First of all, let's talk about distance. The average altitude of low Earth orbit, where most satellites orbit, is about 200 miles above the Earth's surface. The Great Wall of China, on the other hand, is only about 30 feet wide in most places. When you consider that the resolution of the human eye from that distance is about 0.5 arc minutes, you quickly realize that the Great Wall is simply too small to be seen from space with the naked eye. Now, you might be thinking, but what about telescopes or high-resolution cameras? Surely they could see the Great Wall? And you'd be partially right. There are indeed satellites with high-resolution cameras that can capture images of the Great Wall. However, even with the best cameras, the Great Wall is still incredibly difficult to spot from space. That's because it blends in with its surroundings. The color and texture of the Great Wall are similar to the surrounding terrain, which makes it virtually invisible from space. So there you have it. The Great Wall of China cannot be seen from space, not because it's not impressive enough, but because it's simply too small and too well camouflaged. And while it may be disappointing to some, it's important to remember that the Great Wall's true beauty is best appreciated up close and personal, on the ground where you can touch and feel its awe-inspiring structure. Blood libel. Blood libel is a false and anti-Semitic accusation that Jews murder non-Jewish children in order to use their blood for religious rituals, particularly in the making of matzo for Passover. The idea that Jews would steal Christian children and drain their blood for use in their religious rituals is a tale as old as time. But let's be honest, this accusation is about as true as a unicorn riding a mermaid through a rainbow. First of all, let's talk about logistics. If you're going to drain someone's blood, you need a lot of it, and I mean a lot. It's not exactly easy to extract enough blood from a small child to fill a kiddie pool, especially without causing serious harm or death. Not to mention the idea that a group of people would conspire to commit such a heinous act without getting caught is about as likely as a penguin winning the Indy 500. Secondly, let's talk about motive. The idea that Jews would go to such lengths for their religious rituals is simply absurd. Judaism has strict laws about the treatment of animals and the sanctity of human life, so the idea that they would engage in something as barbaric as drinking blood is just plain ridiculous. And finally, let's talk about evidence. There is simply no historical evidence to support the blood libel. In fact, the blood libel has been thoroughly debunked by scholars and historians, and the few instances where it was used as a pretext for persecution and violence have been condemned as baseless and harmful. So there you have it. The blood libel is nothing more than a fanciful myth that has been used to justify horrific acts of discrimination and violence against the Jewish people. It's time to put this ridiculous idea to rest and focus on building a world where everyone is treated with respect and dignity.
Venetian blinds were invented in Venice. The origins of Venetian blinds are a bit unclear, but it is generally believed that they were not actually invented in Venice. The exact origin of Venetian blinds is somewhat disputed, but most historians agree that they were likely developed in Persia or the Middle East, possibly as early as the 9th century. These early versions of Venetian blinds were made of horizontal slats of wood, and they were used to regulate the amount of light and air that entered a room. The design was later introduced to Europe through trade routes, and became popular in France in the 18th century, where it was further developed and refined. The name Venetian blinds may have been given to the design due to Venice's reputation as a center of trade and commerce during the Renaissance. However, there is no evidence to suggest that Venetian blinds were actually invented in Venice. In summary, the idea that Venetian blinds were invented in Venice is likely a myth, as there is no concrete evidence to support this claim.
Christopher Columbus discovered America. Well, to put it bluntly, Christopher Columbus didn't really discover America in the way we often think of it. After all, the Americas were already inhabited by millions of people for thousands of years before Columbus arrived. It's a bit like saying you discovered a restaurant that's been around for ages just because you happened to stumble upon it one day. In fact, Columbus didn't even set foot on what we now know as the United States. Instead, he landed in the Caribbean, and his voyages led to the colonization of the Americas by Europeans. So, if we're going to credit someone with discovering America, it seems more appropriate to recognize the indigenous people who were already living there and had a deep connection to the land and its resources. Of course, all of this is not to diminish Columbus's achievements, as his voyages did open up a new era of exploration and colonization that shaped the course of world history. But let's be clear. He didn't discover America in the sense of being the first to set foot on its soil. And if you try to argue otherwise, you might just end up looking like you're trying to claim credit for something that was already there all along. And that's all for today's episode on Crazy History Myths, where we explore the intriguing world of history and discover some of the most surprising myths that still prevail to this day. I hope you enjoyed learning about some of the most unusual and intriguing historical misconceptions that have been passed down over the years. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more fascinating content like this. Also, let us know in the comments below if you have any other historical myths you'd like us to explore. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.